Folks, kia ora tātou, good morning and a very warm welcome to this Insurance Council of New Zealand 2015 annual conference, and a special welcome to those who have travelled, in some cases, considerable distances to be here today. I'm Andrew Patterson, host of Sunday Business and correspondent for Radio Live and NBR Radio. It's my pleasure to once again be your host for today's conference. The theme of the conference is titled, appropriately enough, Consumer Spotlight, the Changing Environment, reflecting the dramatic shifts that have occurred in the way consumers now hold sway. What a difference a decade makes. The smartphone, the ubiquitous Twitter, and a decade itself have all made that shift in the balance of power a reality. No longer do consumers have to suffer in silence. Now they have a virtual menu of options available to them through which to vent their frustration at the slightest customer service infraction committed by some unsuspecting business. But while we might think this is a relatively recent incarnation, even 100 years ago, the consumer spotlight was changing. Take the story of the US outdoor apparel company, LL Bean. An avid sportsman, founder Leon Wood Bean began selling workman's rubber boots in 1912 out of the basement of his brother's apparel shop. During his initial round of marketing, Bean offered a money-back guarantee to anyone not satisfied with the boots. Of the first 100 orders, 90 were returned after the leather tops separated from the rubber soles. Refunding the money nearly drove Bean out of business. He quickly learned from his mistake, however, and corrected the problems. Today, a century after opening, the mail order company started by Leon Wood Bean has grown to exceed $1.4 billion US in annual sales, proving that it is possible to learn from customer service improvement and, what's more, survive. But when you're deceptive in your approach to customers, then you're really asking for trouble, as VW recently found out to its cost, though the full extent of that cost, as we know, hasn't yet been determined. And Blockbuster Video in the US also discovered deception doesn't pay, which led in part to the demise of the company altogether. In a move to compete with the growing Netflix, the video rental giant announced in 2005 that it was rescinding its long-despised late fees. However, in reality, the late fees remained, since movies not returned by a certain date meant the renter was charged for the entire cost of the film. When the movies were eventually returned, the customers refunded the money minus a $10 restocking fee. The company simply called the late fee by another name. The campaign subsequently and consequently was investigated in 48 US states, and Blockbuster was eventually forced to reimburse the states more than $700,000 US for the costs of the investigation, not to mention the enormous damage it did to its goodwill. It was the beginning of the end for Blockbuster. The company not only reinstituted its late fee policy in 2010, in the same year it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Yet at its peak in 2004, Blockbuster consisted of nearly 60,000 employees and over 9,000 stores. Today, just over a decade later, not a single Blockbuster Video store remains in the US. Customers and customer service should never be taken lightly. As we know, a disgruntled customer can do enormous damage to the reputation of a business. However, a disgruntled customer won over can become a raving fan. The growth of Net Promoter Scores acknowledges this new trend in customer service. The question is no longer about rating service based on customer satisfaction, but rather businesses are scored on the customer's willingness to promote a business to others, which is obviously a much higher threshold to achieve. NPS, as it's known, is the new high water mark for customer service and worthy of consideration if you're not already doing so. So after all, we know the power of the word-of-mouth advertising is by far the most effective form of marketing. So can I just take a moment to acknowledge and thank our sponsors, showing on the screen. Our sponsors today, including our platinum sponsor, KPMG. Thank you for your support. Right, with all that out of the way, it's my pleasure now to introduce Chris Black, who probably is the one speaker today who doesn't require an introduction. But for guests and those who aren't familiar, Chris is, of course, President of the Insurance Council of New Zealand, also Chief Executive of FMG, a position he's held since 2008. He has a wealth of experience from the banking sector, as well as broad insurance experience and expertise in corporate strategy, customer service, and financial and risk management. Chris is currently on the ANZ IF New Zealand Members Advisory Board and the Australasian representative on the board of the International Cooperatives and Mutual Insurances Federation. Chris was also a member of the Insurance and Savings Ombudsman Commission, a position that he recently stepped down from. Please welcome Chris Black to formally open today's conference and introduce Minister Gerry Brownlee. Chris.
Ena rangatira, ena iwi, hui hui, nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to the ICNZ Conference 2015. We have over 300 delegates in the room today. This is a precious opportunity and a rare one for most to come to a day like today, away from our day-to-day jobs and responsibilities, the hustle and bustle, and the opportunity to stand back and reflect. We thank you for taking time out to attend this conference, which is always very well supported by the industry. That support enables us to put on a high-class conference. As Andrew said, thank you very much to the sponsors for your generosity. That helps keep the costs down and provide a value for money conference. That's much appreciated. We're proud to be recognising you in different ways today on the way through. Thank you to our speakers also for all the effort that you have made to attend. We have including Louise Hanson from England, Robert Jones from the United States, Professor Alan Manning from Australia, and also to the speakers for the generous time that they have put in to prepare their presentations. None of them get paid, and it's very much appreciated, so thank you. Today's agenda boasts a fine assembly of distinguished national and international speakers and panellists as well, which is designed to not only test and challenge your thinking on a range of different and important topics, but also provide the opportunity for maybe some of those breakthrough insights that one often gets and only gets in a forum like today. I'd encourage you also to make the most of the networking opportunities with your colleagues in the industry, and there are some opportunities to do that through the day. In terms of the theme of this year's conference, as Andrew said, it's Consumer Spotlight, the changing environment. Now, one often hears the phrase, change is constant. And look, I'd agree with that. But it's interesting to reflect on the forces influencing and shaping our industry today. The shifting demographics, new technologies, including the internet, upheavals to political and economic systems and capital flows, globalization, changes to regulatory environments, the increasing demand for privacy, the demand for and protection of natural resources, understanding, preparing for and responding to the impact of climate change, and the evolving expectations and preferences of consumers, both here and around the world. It's intriguing to think whether these forces are really disruptive and therefore strategically game-changing in terms of our industry, or whether they should simply be seen as another wave of change that we will need to help consumers adapt to, much like the industry has helped consumers adapt to inventions like the automobile, the aeroplane, the steam engine, electricity and the light bulb, the telephone, refrigeration, the radio and television, the printing press, digital cameras, and of course, the PC. While we may have different views on the extent and implications of the forces of change currently confronting us, I sense there is a common view that, however, what has not changed are the core expectations that consumers have of our industry in respect of being straight up, always acting in good faith, the need for transparency and full disclosure, striving to ensure continued access to insurance at affordable prices, an industry that prides itself on high quality advice and providing value for money, and an industry that delivers consistently high levels of service and is there when I ring the bell. Not unrelated to this is the need for good, healthy legislative and regulatory frameworks in which the insurance industry can operate and also develop effectively. And so it's a privilege to have two ministers address us this morning. Before morning tea, we'll hear from the Honourable Paul Goldsmith, who has a challenging role as Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, ensuring we have a healthy balance between New Zealand's commercial and consumer interests. Paul is also the Associate Minister of ACC. Prior to Paul, we are delighted to have Jerry Brownlee, Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery and Minister for the Earthquake Commission, to address us on Canterbury recovery and management of future disasters. As many of you will know, Mr. Brownlee was born and bred in Christchurch, becoming an MP in 1996. He was the Deputy Leader of the National Party from 2003 to 2007. 3 days after the earthquake, on September the 4th, 2010, he was appointed Minister for Canterbury Earthquake Recovery. And as I said, he's the Minister responsible for the Earthquake Commission as well, and also Defence, which is an extremely important portfolio for us as a country as well. So in that sense, Jerry's been there from the start of the Canterbury recovery and has shouldered an enormous workload in the last 5 years, never afraid to face into the tough and sometimes unpopular decisions that have been necessary to respond to a disaster of the scale that we experienced. He has at the same time been always willing to listen and consider the views of not only our industry, but the many other stakeholders that have been instrumental in moving the recovery forward. And I think from a leadership perspective, it's interesting. Leadership's one of those big words. I've always thought that the most important attribute of a leader is to be a good listener. And, you know, as an industry, we've dealt a lot with Jerry over the last 5 years, and I think he epitomises the skills of a very good listener. So we're very proud to have been working with him. Today, we look forward to hearing about the next phase of the recovery as we rebuild a strong and vibrant Christchurch city. And at the same time, take the learning from the last 5 years to improve the understanding and management of the country's natural hazard profile, and at the same time improve our resilience as a nation. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to the Right Honourable Jerry Brownlee.